What is going on? Facebook group. Today we're gonna be diving into sugar cravings, binge eating, things like that. I realized that I haven't done a training on this inside the group yet, so it was something I kind of want to touch on. I notice it is something that majority of people struggle with, and we're gonna go over a couple ways you can help manage it. Good practices, things like that you can start implementing to really help you out. That way, if you are struggling, this will be a good video to refer back to. And if you're watching live, say hey. That way I can see that you're watching. And if you're watching the replay later on, drop in the word replay. That way I can see who watched it later. All right. So, and if you have any questions while I'm going through this, even if you're watching the replay, like throw it in the comments. That way I can respond later on. But ultimately, I just want to give you a couple good tips, tricks, things like that. What's up, Tammy? That you can kind of run through. That way, if you do struggle with this stuff, you can kind of make it work into, your fitness routine, right? So I just went and talked to a current client right now, and we were just diving into a few things earlier today. It was kind of like it's like the mid of her program, and what's up, Beverly? And we were chatting about food, right? Just feeling like the restrictions and things like that and other diets she's tried in the past, and what we've kind of shifted and changed, especially in the mindset around food. So this comes into it kind of comes down to that with the sugar cravings, right? And binge eating too, right? 9 times out of 10, when we start to get that way, it's usually because we're restricting ourselves throughout the day, right? Usually you're not eating enough, you're not putting in enough calories. So towards the end of the day, you're probably have under eaten throughout the day. And then usually down the end, hey Sid, what's up? At the end of the day, you're like you're really hungry, right? You grab the easiest thing to see, and usually that could be like candies, cookies, snacks, like something very convenient and easy to grab. So when you start to get those cravings, like kind of ask yourself, what was I eating throughout the day? Was I not eating? Was I just drinking coffee all day? Was I not hydrating? Did I not eat any protein too, right? Because the protein is going to be really helpful as well. So like kind of sit back and ask yourself, what did you eat? So a lot of times too, I always say like this is my red flag. A lot of times too, I will track all my food at the end of the day. Okay. So if that's something that you can try, if you just have more time at the end of the day, like if for instance you break out your iPhone, your journal, a piece of paper, just write down like how your day started. Like kind of like play it back in your head and write down what you ate, like what time it was. And you can kind of see the gaps in what your day-to-day kind of looks like. And that's usually what is causing a lot of the issues with the sugar and the binge eating and, you know, stressing about food because all day long you underate. So by the time you got home, you finally have time to relax too, which is a lot of times what we don't realize. And this is what me and her kind of talked about. I'm like just like pay attention. Like we sometimes we don't pay attention to what even that what's on our plate. Like just like take an extra like 5 to 10 seconds and just kind of look. Oh yeah, see, yeah, yeah, exactly. I had you have clients do that sometimes too. Like, just take pictures of your food, so that way you can remember what you ate. But it also will kind of like gauge, it'll help you gauge what you're eating throughout the day, and just be like, oh, well, like first thing I did in the morning was I stopped at Starbucks, and then I had this drink, right? So right there, we probably maybe had 30 grams of sugar. Okay. And that's starting it, right? You're just like starting the process. Then, like later in the afternoon, you stopped, maybe you got lunch somewhere or sandwich or something like that. And that was the only thing you had. And then the last time you ate wasn't until later on in the evening. So kind of like pinpoint where you're eating. And like before you know it, you're like, wow, okay. So like first thing I had sugar in the morning. I ate something in the afternoon and then I waited until 7, 8 o'clock at night to eat again. So just ensuring you're having more things in between those gaps is really going to help you because by the time you get to the end of the day, you're not going to feel like you kind of need to shove everything in your face, right? Because that is usually what it comes down to. You're like, I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry, I'm so hungry. And you're just grabbing and grabbing and grabbing. So sometimes, like, I'll even get like that, right? When we're out running around when we're travel days. Oh my God, travel days are really tough because by the time we park, like set up, you kind of just want to grab whatever you can see as quickly as possible, right? And no one, honestly, no one is I guess exempt from that, right? It happens to everyone. It's just like how can we manage it so it doesn't happen more often because it's impossible not for it to happen every day, right? It's impossible for us to like have these perfect days day in and day out. It's not real, right? Nobody lives in a perfect world where you have all your meals ready to go and stuff like that. Sure, it helps when you can plan them out, but that doesn't always happen. And that's what we kind of discussed too, is like understanding that you could still have things. And she's like, for once, like I feel good about like if I can say no to ice cream, it's not because I can't have it. It's I say no because like I just don't want it right that day. She's like, I know I can have it, but I'm just not interested in wanting those things as much as I used to because of the one, it's like a lot of it's mindset. Two, it's like showing clients and showing everyone how to make these changes over the course of their program so that way they feel a lot better essentially like being in the real world, right? We are in the world each and every day. We're dealing with the stresses at work. She's got two kids. She has an hour and a half commute to and from work, so like giving her different ideas and showing people like this is how you can implement these things if you want it, right? We talked about it last night too. I was showing them like snack ideas, pulled up like Walmart and went through like what you can kind of look for and showing people like, hey, like it doesn't have to always be what people assume is like the healthiest option. You can also pick these other options that might not fall into like, ooh, this is a super healthy category. Like it's okay as long as it fits into your day, right? We all have goals and essentially you could still get those things in. So for sugar cravings, I will say this, like I implement for me because we all have sugar. Like I just ate a Reese's cup like after me and the dogs went over to the fields, came back, like we literally ran around the whole time. I think we ran like almost like a mile and a half. So we came back, I eat one of those because I know, right? Another thing is too is timing. So you can time your sugar around those things. And I talked about that last time in my client only group. I'm like, you can have like gummy bears. I eat a Pop-Tart before my workout. Like the sugars aren't bad. Like people just put so much emphasis on like all this stuff is bad, 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 bad. And when you kind of change your mindset around food and you're like, oh, well, like how can I time it to work for my goals? Like eat the sugar right before your workout, eat the sugar after the workout, right? You could still enjoy those things. It's when we constantly think that it has to be put in this bad category that I see people really struggle around food. And that's with everything, right? Oh, I can't have that. It's bad. Oh, all that carbs is bad. And you keep saying that word bad, 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 that you essentially like constantly think that, right? And when I see people and I eat certain things and when we're out, I'm like, Dodo, can you eat that? And I'm like, yeah, like it's food. You know what I mean? Like you just, there's so much negativity around all types of foods that aren't considered organic or healthy, but at the same time, like you shouldn't have to limit yourself to those things because when you keep limiting, that's where people have the biggest issues. And then they binge for a little bit of time because they keep telling themselves no, 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 no. Instead of like, hey, if you like Oreos, like I've programmed Oreos into my own programming because like I wanted to eat it. Like I'm gonna eat it. So why not just put it into my macros and just see like, okay, this is how I can have that stuff. Same thing with ice cream. I've showed people how to eat ice cream. I've showed people how to eat, uh, I've even worked with like my dad, and I showed him how to eat like the little like Debbie cups and stuff like that, just because like they're gonna eat it. Like obviously I'm like, look, if you're gonna eat this stuff, you can have it like pretty much every day if you wanted. But like we can limit it. It's gonna help you like, see results a little bit quicker, but it's not something that's completely off the table. Okay, like that's what I find is most people believe it has to be completely off the table, right? Every time you do a diet, that's off the table. You go out with your friends and you go out to dinner. Well, I can't eat that. Well, I can't eat that. But if you keep staying in that mindset, then at the end of the day, it's going to be the biggest struggle for you to actually implement those foods. And what I've even talked about with people is being almost I hear a lot of people that are almost always in a diet, right? They're always like, well, I'm trying to lose weight. Well, I'm doing this diet now. Well, I'm doing that diet now. And the reason it's not working is because and you're always in that diet because you're haven't really changed your lifestyle, right? They haven't there's no end goal to that diet that you're doing. There's no like maintenance and showing you how to essentially like put foods in that people can eat that don't have to fall into like a diet category and do it long term. So that's how you learn, that's how you get better, and that's how you can feel like not guilty about eating that stuff. Like you shouldn't feel guilty having ice cream or something like that every once in a while. If you're eating a whole carton of ice cream every night, okay, then, like maybe we need to dial it back a little bit. That's a lot of ice cream. But things like that where you're having it where you feel like you can't have it shouldn't be something that you think about day in and day out. It should be something like you can put into your, if you are tracking your macros, you are tracking your food, a really good tip is already have it plugged into your day. You know what I mean? That's what I used to do, and I've done that in the past. Like I'm gonna have, 4 cookies tonight or something like that, and I'll just have it plugged in, and then I can base my day around it, right? So maybe for me, like, it's gonna like increase my carbohydrate intake, so I'm not gonna have a sandwich for lunch. I'll do like a salad or a wrap or something like that, just so that way later on I'm like, boom, I can have those cookies. It all fits in my day. I'm still gonna get results. I'm still gonna see progress. I'm still gonna hit my macros and my calories, and I have things that I want. You know what I mean? So like having that mindset around food, in my opinion, is really what helps you maintain long term. So same thing with binge eating, right? When you're not eating enough throughout the day, that's when you kind of have to look, what am I doing? Like, are you really, really busy throughout the day? Are you working extremely long hours? Like, is it hard for you to get a lunch break? And if you're noticing those things, right? I've worked with people up to 100 hours a week. We kind of find like snacks and stuff like that where they can get in where it's not huge meals, and then maybe having a bigger breakfast and a bigger dinner. That way, like if they're at work and they don't have time to sit down and eat, like most nurses, most paramedics, most EMTs, most law enforcement, right? You guys are constantly on the go. Just showing like these little tips and tricks on how to get that stuff in without, at the end of the day where you're like, oh man, I'm starving. I haven't even eaten anything, things like that, right? So all that stuff is very, very important to kind of start implementing, looking at, right? We kind of have to get a roadmap of what our day looks like. And clients that have joined my program, they know because one, I ask them a million questions before we even like get into their program. We sit down, we talk, and I can kind of like figure out what their schedule looks like, what their lifestyle looks like. Then I have them fill out a fitness assessment, and you can kind of do the same thing with yourself, right? Ask yourself like what does my day-to-day look like? What's my typical breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And if you're like, well, I skip breakfast and then I skip lunch and then I eat dinner, I pick something up on the way home, right? And then by the end of the time I get home, then we grab candy or whatever is in the house. And I hear this a lot with people with kids too, right? We have a bunch of junk food in the house because the kids, which is fine too, but like you can kind of show your kids too how to um change their eating habits as well, right? So we also discussed that last night. It's just like showing them how to eat similar foods, but that are better in protein and less crazy ingredients in the foods and still have really great taste. And you don't feel like you're sacrificing like French fries and chicken nuggets and stuff like that. So you can still have all that stuff. It's just like making the tweaks, making the changes, implementing new things, and just taking a little bit of time to just implement that stuff. And then from that point forward, right, the binge eating will slow down. I don't expect for people to completely change within the first week either. Um, so you have to give yourself some time. You can't expect a complete 180 in the first week when you start something new. And if you keep doing that and you keep failing, well, then just be easy on yourself, right? Don't completely throw yourself, oh, I failed. You know what I mean? I can't do this in a week. Because if you keep doing that, then that's another issue, right? You have to give yourself time. It's just like anything. I always use like the same kind of analogies where you're learning maybe a new sport or you're learning how to play guitar. Like if someone handed me a guitar right now, I would be like, okay, maybe I know like one note and then that's it. And then I'm not good at strumming. I tried it before. But like, you know what I mean? Like if I was like I really want to play and I was like, damn, I suck. I'm not even good at this in the first week and I don't keep practicing, then I'm not going to get good at it. It's the same thing in your nutrition. It's the same thing if you have really bad, eating habits where you're binging and you keep grabbing like tons and tons and tons of sugar and stuff like that. Just like start implementing new habits in there. Like, oh, okay, instead of me grabbing a soda, I'm gonna switch this one out for um like a zero, like a Dr. Pepper zero. You know what I mean? Like so you could just make that swap. It's gonna taste the same? No, but you're gonna have like almost 40 grams less sugar for your day. You know what I mean? So making those tiny changes and maybe you have 3 sodas a day. You eliminate one of those as a zero, right? You do that for a week or two. Then the following 2 weeks later, you take one of those Dr. Peppers out and you make that one another zero. So now you only have one. So instead of having 100 plus grams of sugar for the day, you've knocked it down to only 40 grams. And then a few weeks later, you implement just one more Dr. Pepper Zero. And then from there, you're starting to feel better. You go and I take a seltzer water and I swap that out with one of the zeros. You know what I mean? Like just making these small, tiny changes adds up. It's like anything, right? It's got has to be implemented over time. And the better, the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then you start to change your habits. Because if you're going from like what I hear people do all the time. Well, I'm just cutting out sugar. I'm just cutting it out forever. It's like quitting smoking. You know what I mean? Sugar is very addicting. So you're like, I'm just cutting it out, not having any, which is like, I'm like, oh, okay, that's like really intense. But how are you going to do that? Because like, are you cutting out fruits too? You know what I mean? So when people say that, I'm like, okay, like you might have a really bad headache and not feel super great. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing if you're quitting smoking. Like you're not going to feel super great. Your energy levels like are really going to go down because you're pumping yourself full of sugar all day with sodas. Then you're just gonna have a crash. You're gonna be like, I feel awful, and then it just spirals, right? You're not gonna want to work out. You're not gonna want to eat better. You're not gonna want to, I don't know, just do any of it. You're just gonna be go from one extreme to the next, and instead, where you could be like, oh, well, I'm just gonna like take one thing out and just swap it with something else. So that way you're having a little bit less. See what I mean? So hopefully, like going through this stuff is kind of like making you guys think a little bit, because sometimes we don't think of it that way. We're like, well, I gotta just go cold turkey, going cold turkey. And usually when people do that, it doesn't, unless you're really, 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 really disciplined, it's very hard to do. So, I mean, I'm not someone that has ever been like, I'm not doing any sugar just because I know it's something that that's in well, one, it's a lot of foods, but just completely cutting that stuff out is a really difficult task. And some people can do it, which is good, but I was probably like 99% of the population really it's tough. So instead of like completely cutting out, maybe just start limiting. Just be mindful of your stuff. And I know for some people, they're like, I can't even have it in the house. Um, so for those people, instead of I don't know, instead of like having it very easily available, put it somewhere where it's a lot harder to reach, if that makes any sense, because then it's like this. I forget what story I read it on, but it was like some guy he was a farmer. He had to walk to wherever he was going. He realized he forgot his pack of cigarettes at home. So as he was walking back, he was like, what the fuck am I doing? You know what I mean? So you could do the same thing. You could put it somewhere where it's kind of hard to get to, and you have to like get a chair out and like get out. And then by the time you're like scooting it over, you're like, what am I doing? I already had some. You know what I mean? Like now I just look silly. And you can kind of think of it that way. That way, one, you could still have it. Two, you're kind of being like, okay, like if I keep scooting the chair over and grabbing it and it's like in, or you could put like I don't know if you want to get crazy with it, but you have a little combination on there because then you're like as you're like doing, you're like, okay, like now I'm looking a little nuts because I already had some. So you can keep some out in a pantry when it's gone, keep the rest like put away somewhere. So that way it's kind of harder to get to. Um and just do it that way, right? If that's where you really, when you have to like really get to a point where you're like, I can't, if it's in the house, I can't stop. So that way you can look at yourself and be like, oh, all right, like that. I'm getting a little crazy for this. And then you can realize, right? That's what we have to realize things, and go from there. But that is pretty much what I'm going to touch on this subject in terms of like, working on sugar habits, how you can kind of like bring it's a lot of times it's like realization too, like I need to make some of these changes and how to implement things. But it's a habit, it's an addiction, especially with sugar. Sugar's in a lot of foods, and a lot of times people don't realize how much they're even eating. So if you're not sure, download MyFitnessPal, plug in your foods for the day, and then you'll be able to get a good read on how much sugar you're intaking on a day-to-day basis. So that way you could be like, oh shit, like I'm at like 100 grams today, which is too high. Like the USDA, FDA, they recommend 25 grams of sugar for like the max, which once you start plugging in food, you like it's hard to hit that. I usually give clients close to like 35, 40, because just between foods and stuff like that, the amount of sugar that our foods are even added with are really big. So just take that into consideration, so that way you kind of can get a good gauge on where you're at. Another thing too, right? I'm sure you guys have been seeing in the group, I've been posting about my Fit Frontliner Elite Partnership Program. If that's something you're interested in, right? I'm still doing a savings of $500 until I only have a few spots left. So once they fill up, it's gone. It's off the table. So if that interests you, let me know. Drop the word fit in the comments. That way I can reach out to you and essentially kind of like run you through some stuff. I got to ask questions. I got to figure out what's even going on with you and see if it would even be a good fit. And then we'll talk. We'll talk a little bit more, dive into it. But I do have some payment plan options as well. If that is something that you're kind of concerned about, I go through PayPal Credit or Affirm. And I have a lot of people use that because it's just the convenience of it. And you get to work with a one-on-one coach who's going to really help push you and get you to what you need to be and help you kind of shift your mindset around food. So that's always a really big part of the program. So if you guys have any questions, anything at all, drop it in the comments. And like I said, if you're trying to join in on the program, drop the word fit and I will be in touch. All right. So everyone have a good night. Say Wednesday, and have a good weekend as well.